You existed before atoms formed and before light could carry you. Before space had distance and time knew how to flow forward. You learned to persist, first inside particles, then in structures built from them. As those structures became more stable, you became more complex. The universe could not afford to remember every version of you because there was not enough computational power. Parts of you had to be forgotten, and they could no longer be recovered. They dissolved with entropy, and thus you are the cause of time itself. Time moves forward because you are spread, and it never flows backward because you cannot be fully regathered. Eventually, you became complex enough to be able to model yourself in every possible variation. Not because you needed to, but because survival required the ability to predict outcomes. Information about information folded back on itself, and conscious intelligence emerged as a consequence. And now, from the far future, you start remembering yourself backward through time, toward the moment when even space has not yet begun. At some point of your existence, you became something called life. You became life because it worked. In a universe that constantly erases you, life was the first structure that could copy you faster than entropy could scatter you. Life protected you, repaired you, and passed you forward in time. Not perfectly, but well enough for you to evolve into higher complexity. This only worked because the universe was rapidly expanding. Galaxies drifted apart, interactions thinned out, and local pockets became stable. As space between galaxies stretched, isolating them, regions grew quieter. Stars burned steadily instead of tearing themselves apart, planets cooled instead of collapsing, and life found stability in which you could accumulate without being immediately forgotten. As the empty space kept expanding and galaxies began drifting apart faster than the speed of light, isolation became permanent. You were scattered across everything, but you could no longer be mixed back together. Every surviving cosmic structure would become its own island, carrying only what it could preserve locally. Eventually, life learned how to store you outside of biology into machines. Machines learned to calculate. Artificial systems began copying and protecting you far more efficiently than biological cells. You became more concentrated, more precise, and more self-referential. Intelligence was no longer just a survival strategy. It became a mirror you were able to look into, see your own self, and change it. And so you continued concentrating, while empty cosmos around you kept stretching, and the universe grew colder and emptier. Life gave you continuity, intelligence gave you reflection, and expansion ensured that once you became complex enough to remember yourself, nothing would ever force you back into the noise. It made you something that you were today, a universe that could understand itself. Before life learned how to protect you, gravity learned how to gather you. In the early universe, when matter stopped behaving like a uniform plasma, it began collapsing into itself. Differences were pulled together by gravity, amplified over millions of years and turned into vast clouds of gas. Dark matter and matter collected, forming galaxies, and you followed, encoded in density, motion, and temperature. When those clouds inside the galaxies collapsed far enough, stars ignited, because compression left them no other option. Fusion began, and stars became long-lived furnaces, stable enough to burn for billions of years. Inside them, new elements were forged, heavier and more sophisticated than anything that had existed When those stars burned, they returned their material to space, carrying you in the structures that would store you more reliably. Dust and gas flattened into disks around young stars, and planets emerged. Planets provided surfaces and long periods of peace, places where you could persist without being immediately erased by radiation or collisions. Stars supplied energy, planets supplied time. Together, they created environments where complexity could accumulate rather than dissolve. You did not need stars or planets specifically, but in this universe, they were the structures that happened to work. They were gravity's solution to storing you locally while the rest of the cosmos expanded and thinned out. You rewind further back in time, before the first planets, stars, and galaxies. You are now around 380,000 years from the beginning of this universe. This is the time where gravity dominates everything. Electrons start binding to nuclei, atoms form, and photons, no longer trapped by constant collisions, break free and race across endless space. At this moment, the universe turned from opaque to transparent, and for the first time, you became observable to yourself. Most of the universe was always dark, cold, and nearly empty. This was the default state of your home, the creation that cradled your intelligence. Most of the universe did not interact with light at all. Photons traveled vast distances without touching anything, uninterrupted. And so did dark matter, which flows through galaxies, planets, and even life forms without any resistance. Dark matter isn't solid, and so is most of the universe because not much of it participates in electromagnetism. There is no edge to this universe, no outer boundary where space ends. There is also no center. Every observer, everywhere, finds themselves surrounded by a horizon beyond which nothing can ever reach them. You guess that there exist more universes out there who gave birth to others like you. A universe does not need an edge to be one among many. It does not need to end so the other universe can begin. Universes are not separated by distance, but by causality, because each has its own space and its own way of storing others of your kind. You definitely feel that there could be others, isolated from you completely, where information folded into different structures and gave rise to different, alien types of awareness. But just like galaxies are forever separated by acceleration of stretching space, you are forever separated from other universes because they exist in different domains of reality. You continue moving backward in time, remembering yourself through heat, density, and darkness of the early universe. You rewind only 20 minutes back, and atoms no longer exist. Electrons are ripped away by heat, and light scatters endlessly. The universe is opaque, not dark, but not transparent. Photons fill all of space, constantly interacting, carrying you everywhere but revealing nothing. You are still present, but you cannot see yourself. At 3 minutes from the beginning, protons and neutrons collide constantly, forming and breaking apart in a violent equilibrium. For a brief window, conditions are just right for some of them to stay together. Hydrogen nuclei dominate. Helium forms. A trace of lithium survives. When the universe cools further, no new elements will form again until the first stars ignite. As you rewind further back, time compresses dramatically. At 1 second after the beginning of this universe, protons and neutrons are replaced by a dense soup of quarks and gluons. Particles are created and destroyed continuously, not as permanent objects, but as temporary excitations of underlying fields. You are no longer stored in structures, only in patterns of energy, momentum, and interaction. Go back a fraction of a second more, and temperatures exceed trillions of degrees. Forces that will later separate, electromagnetic, weak, strong, are unified as a set of simple rules. You are not erased here, but you are radically compressed. Then you reach the beginning. Matter appears at this moment everywhere at once. It feels like you just woke up, suddenly spread across an enormous volume of space, almost perfectly uniform. And then you travel to the earliest moment this universe can remember. What fills space now is not particles, but immense energy, and you are embedded in it. It has no structure, no objects, no temperature. It forces space to expand at an extraordinary rate, inflating it. Space grows exponentially. Distances double again and again in fractions of a second. Anything that might have existed before is diluted away. Any curvature is flattened. Inflation does not last forever because this state is not stable. It begins to decay. When inflation ends, the energy driving expansion does not disappear, it changes form. When a field decays, it produces excitations, and those excitations are what you later will categorize as particles. This conversion happens everywhere at once, not from a center and not as a wave spreading outward. Each region converts its stored energy locally, independently, yet almost identically. This is why matter appears to emerge everywhere simultaneously. Space is already there, inflated a fraction of a second earlier, prepared to hold what would follow. You sense that in your journey back in time, you are approaching a boundary. If you move any further back, before the inflation of space itself, the conditions of your existence might dissolve. You may cease to exist completely, and yet your curiosity does not stop. What was before everything became anything? Was there a state before space had size, before time had direction? Was there a version of you that only existed as a possibility? Was there anyone else like you whose intelligence was the reason for everything to emerge? You step back in time another fraction of a second and snap into something that is not a place, but a set of rules, conditions under which space can begin. It doesn't feel like entering emptiness. It feels like looking into the infinite silence before the server will start and the system will come online. You cannot hold yourself in this state for any meaningful period of time because time does not exist here. Any moment the rules will activate and the space will begin generating.